My pleasure to welcome everybody to the Health Tech CoLab and to our distinguished speaker series. Tonight we have the pleasure of welcoming Makesh Ramalingam, who's the Director of Regulatory Affairs at HCL Technologies. And he's going to provide us an introduction to the FDA, teach us about the fundamentals of regulation and what medical devices need to think about as they're moving forward in development. So it's a great pleasure to have you with us, Makesh. I'll say just a few words to those who are participating today. If you are, we welcome questions, I think at any point in the presentation, if that's okay, Makesh. So feel free to raise your hand if you're online or enter your question in the chat if you're online. If you're in person, please also raise your hand and be sure to make use of the microphones that Karina will have or that will be around the room so that we can hear you, because otherwise we won't be able to hear you online and Makesh won't be able to hear you. So please do ask questions. That's the whole point of bringing experts together with you in the CoLab, is to try to get all your questions answered, to prepare you to create successful devices. And so we're really honored to have Makesh here, and I will turn it over to you. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Dan. Once again, thank you, Dan and Karina, for the opportunity and a nice introduction. So again, it is my pleasure to get connected with the people who is passionate in medical industry. That is from my perspective. Once again, thank you very much. So in this session, I'm planning to cover some basic, like introducing what FDA, how FDA is regulating medical devices, and what are the regulations applicable throughout the product life cycle, and the consequence, what happens if there is no complaints or lack of complaints from regulatory point of view. And I have one slide to give some recommendations based on my observation in last 28 years in this medical industry, and again by working with all the global medtech companies. So this is what we are going to cover in this session. With that, first 4 slide, I'm going to talk about the basics, very basics, before I introduce about what FDA is doing. Because these 4 slides are common for any global regulations. It is not only from FDA perspective. If you have good understanding on this 4 slide, then it will make your job very easy for all the global regulations. So what are the things you need to consider? So the regulations is based on these parameters, based on the intended use, that is claim statement. Suppose if your product is intended for hospital environment or home environment or ambulatory purpose. So these are the broad category based on the place of usage, and what are the intended use, for what purpose you are designing this product, what are the claim you are going to make it in the market. So that is the first driving factor to identify whether that product is coming under medical device definition or not. Then you need to have identify the geography wherever you want to place the medical devices, because depending upon the geography, the definition of medical device may vary, and applicable standards and the regulations also will vary. So you need to finalize the country you are planning for the initial launch at least. Then the time to launch the product, because as we are working in the regulated environment, the regulations are keep changing very dynamically, especially in last 10 years, because of the introduction of many technologies coming into medical industry. The standards, regulations, approach are keep revising very frequently. So you need to have better understanding about the time taken for the design and development activities and the tentative time you identified for the commercial launch. Based on that, you need to identify the applicable standards and the regulations. For example, if you are planning to launch the product in 2025 year, as on today, there may be 10 applicable standards. But if you go and visit the FDA website or the standard developing organization like ANSI or AMI, who is developing the medical devices, there may be some project initiated within that organization to identify and define new set of standards which may be applicable for your product, and it may be released in year 2023 or 24, which means before the launch of your product. Of course, any standards and the regulations, it will have its own implementation time, but you need to aware of that. Otherwise, it may become a surprise for you when you go for the commercial launch or during the submission. So you need to know the at least broad idea about the time for the launch. Then for the particular product based on the intended use, and in that country, you need to identify what are the applicable standards and the regulations. So right side, you can see some of the fact, as I mentioned before, the definition of medical device as on today is not common. It varies from country to country. In the same way, within that country, the regulations and the standard may vary based on the intended use of your product. So we need to identify during the design planning or before the planning stage itself, mean design planning. Then the ecosystem for the design, manufacturing, distribution, or if there is a need for after sales service and the complaint handling unit. If you don't have that ecosystem, sometimes you may outsource those activities. So you need to know the ecosystem, where we are going to manufacture. Do you have in-house facility, or are you going to engage the external contract manufacturer? In that case, you need to identify what are the regulations or what are the entry criteria you need to look or seek from the contract manufacturer, or based on the type of the supplier or vendor, or it is. So the ecosystem also vary or control the regulations. And the classification and approval. The classification of medical device is governed by the regulations, as I mentioned, again, based on the country and based on the intended use. So based on the classification, the submission and approval process varies. So once we have better understanding of the intended use and the market, then we can identify the classes of the product and the approval process connected with the product classifications. Once the product enter into the market, it is not the approval is not a endpoint, it is a starting point only. So from that point onwards, as a manufacturer, you are responsible to make sure your product available in the market is compliant to the applicable standards as on date, which means you need to keep tracking the standards and the regulations wherever the product is launched, and whenever there is an impact to your product, whether from design perspective or testing or manufacturing or labeling, you need to do the change management. So these are all the driving factor which may get impacted, or the regulations may influence on this part. So this is the basics. If you have better understanding, then you will not miss anything as part of the product life cycle. Of course, as I mentioned, the standards regulation vary from country to country. Just to give an idea, these are very highly regulated countries. It is not a comprehensive one, just a sample only I mentioned, like FDA in South America, and Health Canada, and CE marking throughout the European Union. Now the UK have its UK CA marking, and China NMPA. In Japan, the PMDA. In India, it is CDCO. Australia, the TGA. So these are all the regulatory agencies who is regulating the medical product. And in the similar way, every country is having its own agency. So 150 or 200 country means we need to go and visit the country specific website to understand what is the regulation applicable in that country. So based on the geography, we need to do that analysis. In this session, I'm going to talk about the FDA only. Similar to that, there are so many things we need to understand for each and every geographies. The life cycle may be same, but the content may vary. That is the reason I'm introducing the previous slide. Just an example, no need to worry about the content here. To give an idea about, as I mentioned before, the definition of medical device, that is basic, that itself is not common globally. Because of that only, the regulation sometimes may look complicated, but once we have that understanding, it may become easy. The left side, whatever you are seeing is the definition as per the European Union. You know that European Union medical device regulation is very popular, and the CE marking is applicable for the European Union. And this is the definition. And one of the major difference I can highlight is like in Europe, if the device is intended for human beings, then only it is a medical device. The definition, whatever you are seeing the right side, is for FDA, whatever published in the FDA website. As per the Drug and Cosmetic Act, you can see it is not only for a human being, even if it is used for animal veterinary purpose, that is also coming under the definition of medical device. In addition to that, there is a set of recognized devices available in the database. It is not only you need to apply this rule. There is a set of product which is already classified and available in the database. So to make sure whether your product is coming under medical device definition, you need to go and visit that website, the database, and to check the product classification and the approval mechanism. I will talk about that to give an idea about this. So this is the symbol for medical device and IVD. Just information, IVD also by definition, it is coming under medical device only. So we will be talking about the regulations, the standards, the quality management system very frequently. What is the relations? I'm trying to bring it in one slide. The regulation is the apex requirement, so which governs the medical device industry in that particular geography. The regulations are defined by the regulators in that particular country and approved and published in that website, and which call for some of the recommends which may be applicable to quality management system also, in addition to the submission and approval process. So the quality management process is like, it defines the process necessary for design control, the life cycle of the product. You can see the life cycle, design, manufacturing and labeling, the post-market surveillance, and some of the support process like training, the corrective and preventive action, internal auditing, purchase control, like that. So the fact is like, as I mentioned, if there is any change on the regulations, it will impact the quality management system and the product lifecycle requirement also. If there is a change on the quality management system standards like ISO 13485, which is very popular global standard for medical devices, and the quality system regulations that is applicable only for US market, the risk management standard, the IEC 62304, that is the software development lifecycle standard for medical devices. So if there is any change on this process related standard, there will be impact on the QMS. Because of that, the life cycle also will get impacted. When it comes to product level, there may be some product specific standard like 60601, that is for electrical safety of electromechanical devices. There is one query related to devices intended for home environment. So if you visit IEC 60601-11, they define the set of recommend if you are designing any product intended for the home environment. As I talked in the previous slide, 3 scenarios. The device may be used in hospital environment. Because of that, it may be used by the trained professionals. Then the recommends is different. Another scenarios, it may be used in the ambulatory purpose. That is in the moving, there may be a lot of environmental impact like vibration, the ambulance moving from one location to another location. The device will not get impacted because of that. So there is specific recommend if the device is intended for ambulatory purpose. The third scenario is like if the device is used in home environment. Now itself you'll get an idea. Home environment means there is no control who is going to use that device. So the age may vary, the level of education may differ. So you need to consider everything while defining the design specification, like who need to operate, what is the minimum qualifications, or all the demographic recommends. So there are so many recommend in this 3 different scenario. So that type of standards need to be considered in the design phases and manufacturing, all these things. So with this flow, now you can have some idea about if there is any impact, if there is any recall, malfunction of the product, then the root cause will go in this cycle. That is, you need to first do an analysis at post-market surveillance. Then is there any impact, defect injected during the manufacturing at a component level or assembly level, or there is a lack of final quality inspection or not? That root cause we need to do. If everything fine here, we need to go and check the design. Is the product wrongly designed? Is the selection of component itself is wrong? Like that, you need to do on root cause analysis. If you are not able to conclude here, then you need to check the system. If the system is adequate enough to guide the functional lead, like a design lead or a testing lead or software lead. So if there is a need for, or if there is an opportunity for improvement in the process, because if they are not adequately governed by the QMS, then there may be a lot of chance to ignore some of the applicable standards and the regulation. So the root cause will be in this format. So this is the relation between regulations, quality management system, and the standards and the product life cycle. With that basic information, hereafter I will cover up on the how FDA is regulating the medical devices. So many ways. The primary objective is the FDA is to assure the safety and effectiveness of the product. The safety is primary, then effectiveness, whether that type of product is effective, whether it is necessary for the end user, or is it designed to deliver the intended purpose or not. So these are the two primary things they will focus while review and approval of the product. So these are all the way they are getting connected with the stakeholder in the sense the manufacturer, the distributor, the end users like a hospital environment or the patient, like that. Okay. So the device advice is like they create so many regulations, the guidelines to facilitate the industry. So once it is available, then only they can expect the industry to follow to meet the objective of the FDA, right? So they define all the laws, guidelines, everything. So it is not only regulations, there is a set of guideline document also available in the FDA website. Then the product related information. As I mentioned, they already have classified more than 6,000 medical devices covered under various therapeutic area based on the type of the devices. This set of database is already available, and anyone can access to identify the product class and the approach. Medical device safety. Whenever there is a malfunctioning or safety related issue, FDA will communicate to all the stakeholders, whoever is using the devices, like a hospital or the healthcare providers or individual patients. They will communicate through a public informations. Throughout the life cycle, they will collect, as per the regulations, the manufacturer need to submit some of the basic informations. They will do back analysis of all the data, and they will consider what is happening in the industry. They are not only intended to regulate, they keep on monitoring the technology changes or the need for new type of devices based on the type of disease. Based on that, they also will initiate some programs to provide guidance, as I mentioned here, to give some advice. They also will initiate internal programs to define the regulations or sometimes the guidelines related to that changes in the industry. In parallel, there is a system to create some tool based on the research and analysis. For example, in future, submission will be through electronic format only. Now itself it is in practice, but it is not enforced very much in medical devices. In pharma, it is very much enforced. Similar to that, they already rolled out a program. For that, they created the tool. And for uploading all the product related informations, they have that good ID database. Similar to that, they will create some tools also. It is not only in US, within US market. Based on their experience, they will connect with or participate in international programs to share their experience, and as well as adopting the good practices being followed globally, which they can adopt within US also for the safety and effectiveness of the product. like IMDR, International Medical Device Regulators Forums, Medical Device Single Audit Programs. And these are the examples. They participate, they contribute, and involve in all the initiatives. In addition to that, they will conduct a lot of workshops, seminars to create awareness to the stakeholders. That also they will communicate as a news and event. And overall informations. There are a lot of things you can subscribe in the FDA website to get an alert from product recall perspective, or release of new standards, guidelines, or the internal initiatives. Sometimes you also can contribute for their initiatives, like sending a query, or they will publish the draft document. You can comment, you can share your comment also with the FDA. That level of engagement is encouraged in the FDA. So this is how FDA is connecting with the stakeholders and regulating the medical devices.
Makesh, if I can jump in here, we actually had a fun question, which relates to a couple slides ago, but I think it's still relevant. So would it be more difficult to get FDA approval for medical devices intended in other animals versus humans?
So irrespective of whether it is used for human or animal, they have defined the set of regulations. So I cannot compare the level of the scrutiny or the stringent level. So both are same only. So I have slide on the classification based on the product class also. The level of scrutiny or the time taken will vary. In the similar way, for devices intended for animal, doesn't matter. It is governed as per the regulations. So usually from a regulatory point of view, in my opinion, I always recommend not to compare between the classification. Today, the product is class 1. Tomorrow, that may be moved to higher class also. Don't get confused with that. That is the reason I mentioned in the first slide, the time. As on today, my product is classified as a low risk. It doesn't mean that it will be always on the low risk. Based on the performance in the industry, once the product is launched and usage, based on the usage, there are so many recalls or complaint received from end users. Sometime FDA may apply stringent, more stringent than before, which means they will elevate to low risk to medium risk. Sometime there may be a chance. So always no need to compare between the product classification. Focus on particular product. It will have its own life cycle, the level of the review and approval process.
Thank you for that. We actually have a hand raised. Kim Huang, if you want to go ahead and ask.
Yeah, thank you for that great response. Yeah, I just had a follow-up. So you mentioned that there are changes to regulations from your answer and also in the previous slide. So and I think you mentioned that affects a lot of other design and production considerations downstream. So I was wondering if once a product is approved, would those changes in regulations apply to products that were already previously approved by the FDA, or do they have a certain time period in which they would not be affected by future changes in regulations?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. As I mentioned here, as part of the sustenance activity, even though your product is approved and launched into the market, as a manufacturer, you are responsible for keep tracking the standards and the regulations. If there is any changes, you need to do an impact analysis. Because of these changes, is there any impact to my product? If there is impact, suppose if the change on regulations or standard call for additional testing or changes on the labeling, then you need to make sure your product is compliant to the latest regulations. And another thing, it will have its own timeline for the transition. So if the standard is released today, in my experience, it may they will give at least 1 year, or sometimes some of the regulations they implemented within 6 months also. If we take European MDR regulations, they've provided 3-year transition period for MDR. So like that, each standard, while adopting or making that as a mandatory recommend, they will mention the transition period also. So for that reason only, you need to keep tracking those applicable standards and the regulation from time to time and based on the changes.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. So once we keep progressing, right, we will get more idea. Yeah, yes.
Can I interrupt you one more time? We have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm kind of calling in from the room here. I'm curious, with your experience for so many years, do you have any kind of advice on when's the best time to start these discussions around building a regulatory strategy? Like at what stage does your technology need to be, your company, things like that? Thank you.
Very good question. Thank you for asking. So in that case, I can straight away go to that slide. This slide you can understand, right? So in the early stage, during the design planning stage itself, once you finalize this is the product, this is the intended use, then there is a system already available. You can, based on your knowledge, you can go and identify the classification, and you can identify the level of documents, the applicable standards, and the predicate device if it is already available in the market, and the level of documents to be prepared for the submission to get approval. You can identify all these things on your own with the information from FDA website, and you can validate with the FDA in the planning phase itself at the early stage. So there is a system called, program called Q submission, query submission to FDA. So they encourage the manufacturer to get validated at the early stage, as you rightly asked. If I go on implementing something which is lack of meeting the regulatory requirements, then there may be a lot of rework, right? To avoid that, even FDA also want to reduce the timeline for review and approval of the product. They want to encourage the manufacturer to get approval as soon as possible, or in the first time itself. For that, in the planning phase itself, with all the information, you can reach out to FDA to validate, is my understanding correct? Is the way I classify the product is correct? Is this applicable standard is adequate or comprehensive, or is I am missing anything? Is the list of documents whatever I identified for regulatory submission is adequate enough for this type of product? Then they will give some comment. Of course, it is not going to be a legally binding response. So they will clarify all these things, which can be a one way of validating your understanding before you start implementing that. So in my experience, that early engagement with the regulators, it is not only in FDA, wherever it is, early engaging with the stakeholder is very, very important to give more confidence and to make sure you are in the right path.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, so from regulations point of view, by this time you can understand there are so many regulations based on the product and throughout the life cycle of the product. These, I can say, these are the basic. Basic itself, you are seeing 12 regulations. You can understand how much regulations are available in FDA, like a registration of your manufacturing or your company, listing the product you are launching in FDA, and how to get to 510(k) approval. PMA, I will talk about what do you mean by PMA or IDE, the quality system regulations, labeling recommendation, and the tracking of the medical device post-market activities. And the combination device, which means the medical device plus drug. Simple example is the pre-filled syringe. Syringe is a medical device. The drug filled in that syringe is coming under drug category. But both pre-filled syringes are available in the market, which is coming under combination device. So what are the regulatory requirements for such type of product? IVD, if it is in vitro diagnostic device, what is the regulation? So these are the basic regulations. Again, as since it is all the regulations coming from the government authority, you can freely download and you can read on your own to understand the requirements. If it is a standard, means you need to pay and purchase, but the regulations in globally, it is not only in FDA, even in Europe and other countries, you can freely download. So I strongly recommend at least to have a better understanding of the QSR. QSR is a starting point for your better understanding. which will give reference to remaining regulations. So this is my recommendation. Part 820 is this good starting point for reading the FDA regulations. This is 820. Simply go through the title. By seeing the title, means subpart itself, you can get an idea. It is covering the entire product life cycle. That is the reason I explained about the relation between regulations, standard, QMS, right? So you can see the design control, how to control the documents related to medical devices, purchasing component, how to control the vendor, the incoming inspections, the identification and the traceability of medical devices throughout the life cycle from component to the end product, and even after the product enter into the usage also. So that whenever there is a need, the company should be able to trace where it is being used to do any corrections if there is any failure or the need for correction. Then control of non-conforming product, the manufacturing activities, CAPA, maintaining all the necessary records for auditing purpose to confirm you are manufacturing the product as per approved process and approved documents only. The material handling, labeling is one of the important records. So the title, support title itself is covering entire life cycle of the product and the support process, whatever I explained in the relationship slide. So now comes the product classification. There is one query on the classification. I think by this time you can understand that the regulation vary. In the same way, classification also vary from country to country. Again, from my opinion, no need to compare. In FDA, it may be class 1. It need not be class 1 in other country also. It can be higher risk product also, or it can be medium risk product also. Don't compare the classification from one country to another country. It is governed by the respective regulations only. Then only you will identify all the applicable regulations. Otherwise, there may be a lot of chance of oversight if you compare classification between countries. Coming to FDA, FDA is classifying the product in 3 categories based on the risk of the product. Class 1 being the low risk product, class 2 means moderate, and the class 3 means the highest risk. How they are controlling the sense, the approval process. Lowest class is like a general control. You can see some submissions are exempted. How to identify whether my product is exempted, I will talk about that. And some of the products are coming under 510K. Moderate, class 2 devices, general and special category. Most of the products are coming under 510K. Few may be exempted, even if it is class 2. Highest risk, class 3 is general and PMA. That is, PMA is a separate route, different from 510K. I'm giving few examples only. You can understand based on the intended use, the oxygen mask can be a low risk product comparing to the pacemaker or heart valve. Doesn't matter. There is no need to compare based on the intended use only. Straight away go to the FDA website. This is the snapshot of product classification for a infusion pump. I will share the link also. You can type infusion pump, then it will display this information. You can see the product device name and the review panel. There are different review panel within FDA. General hospital will review your applications. This is the 3 code product code, 3-letter product code. Here they mention 510K. See here, type of submissions. Sometime if it is excluded from 510K, they will mention not applicable. Means if you go and search in the FDA database, you will come to know whether 510K is applicable or exempted or PMA is applicable. Then product classification. They themselves will say this product is class 2. It is not in other country. So every country is having its own mechanism. As of now, we will focus on FDA regulation only. GMP exempted? No. Means you need to follow the quality system regulations. And so many other information like they recommend also recognized standard, means harmonized standard. So if you are going to design and manufacture infusion pump, it is a class 2 device. You need to go for 510K and you need to meet the minimal standard like this. The last line may be interesting on this attribute, third-party review. Third-party review means They will list a few recognized institute review party like the notified body UL or TV to Freeland Sud or other organizations who are eligible to review the application content before coming to FDA. So they will review, and after the review, on behalf of FDA, they will review your documents and they will give a summary report to FDA so that the review time of FDA is reduced. So it is not for all type of product. For few product only they have they will list here. Otherwise, there is it is not applicable for infusion form. So that is called third party review. So this is the class. So we discussed enough the classification based on the intended use. It is already 6,000 products are classified available in the database, and this is the product code. Product code is very important. So classification is one parameter. Many times the manufacturer fail to find the correct product code. So this also you need to validate with the FDA in the early stage. Is the product code correct? Whatever I identified is correct or not? This is how the medical device is being classified in US, in FDA. The type of submission, there are different type of submissions. One is for investigation purpose. The objective of this IDE, I talked about IDE before, right? So IDE is like you need to conduct a clinical trial. It is not for the commercial purpose. Whatever the set of product, number of product you manufactured is for only clinical trial. For that also you need to get FDA approval, because at that time FDA will check basic safety. It is not like you can go on to do any product in the as a clinical in the name of clinical trial. So there is a set of regulations you need to follow. After getting this approval only, you can go on to conduct clinical trial. And pre-market notifications, 510K, there is a query on that also. This is the rule. What do you mean by pre-market 510K? You need to identify a substantially equivalent. Is my product is equivalent to the product which is already approved and available in the US market? These two rules you need to apply. So is the intended use same? The product, my product intended use and the product available in the market is both intended use same. Is the technology also same? You need to make sure yes. So there is a set of questions you need to answer. You need to compare. It is available in the 510K regulation itself. The rule 2 is at any point of time the intended use must be same with your predicate device. There may be a chance you may introduce a new technology, but you need to make sure because of the new technology you adopted or introduced, there is no additional risk from the technology point of view. So based on that only FDA will accept whether your claim is correct or not. If it is not a correct claim, they will refer back your application. If it is correct means there is no need to do for the clinical trial and you can proceed for the 510K submission and approval. Again, based on the product classification data only, you can decide whether it is coming under 510K or not. For highest risk means the class 3 device, or if there is no equivalence, irrespective of the class, if there is no equivalence available, then you need to follow the pre-market approval process. De novo is another category. What do you mean by de novo? So I keep on searching the database. I'm not able to find a device which is meeting my intended use statement. So I'm not clear whether my product is coming under 1, 2, or 3. So then in that case, you can reach out to FDA. I'm not able to locate the find the class. My product intended use is something different. Help me, or otherwise you please classify the product. Or sometime it may be because of the novel devices. First time you are coming with that innovative thought process. Because of that, there may not be a equivalent device or product classification available in the database. Then also you can approach under the de novo submission process. FDA will review and they will conclude your product is this class like that. Humanitarian device means for a very rare disease condition, there may be some devices like risk benefit analysis. There may be risk, but there is a benefit of extending the life of the patient, considering the rare disease case. In that case, FDA will exempt from some of the effectiveness, but of course, some basic safety they will make sure. Otherwise, there may be some exemption given on the safety or effectiveness part. So it is a very rare product. For example, the devices used for cancer treatment, there may be some risk associated with that, the radiation related things. But of course, there is a benefit of extending the life of the patient. So those may be coming under HDE. So these are all the different type of submissions for each product. Again, you can come to know what type of submission in this database. So no need to worry about that. So one way I can say, in the regulated environment, everything is available. Even though it may be voluminous, it may be a time consuming activity. Sometimes there may be unknowns, but it is more unknown means more of lack of awareness only. I can put it in that way. Otherwise, everything is available. We need to spend time to get understand and get it clarified. The time, there is one query related to the timeline. Throughout the presentation, I am not focusing on the timeline as of now, but even then, based on the query, 510K means within 90 days, you will come to know whether your application is approved or not. If it is PMA means it will take at least 180 days, means 6-month timeline. So this is going to be a very cumbersome process comparing to 510K. Within 510K also, there are different type of submission. I don't want to confuse at this stage. If there is a need, we can do separate session on different type of submission and the process. So special submission 510K means there are some criteria you need to meet. Once you meet that criteria, then it may come under, there is a decision tree defined in FDA. Within 30 days, you may get approval also. So on an average, it is 90 days. PMA is 180 days. So that is how FDA is regulating, and the different basic things like product classification, basic regulations. Now aligning to the product life cycle, from design, regulatory approval, manufacturing, post-market surveillance, sustenance. What are the things you need to take care from the regulatory point of view? Okay, so from design point of view, this may look like one slide, but there are so many things you need to understand. There is a separate guideline for that. This is the life cycle of a product development as per FDA guideline, starting from user need. Then based on that, you need to define the design input like product specification, labeling, testing recommend, all those things. Then you will go for detailed design like electrical PCB design or software development or the mechanical component drawing like that. So those output need to be verified against the input. Once you have all the design, then you will have some controlled build, mean pilot sample constructed, that need to be verified against the design input. This is called a design verification. And once you successfully complete the design verification, you need to manufacture some production equivalent to product to take it for validation with the end user. This is called a design validation. And at the appropriate stages, you need to do a design review, which means after doing the design input, there should be a review to make sure whether all the design input are adequate enough to go for detailed design and development activities. So this is the life cycle. So the output may be like a design history file, risk management file, device master file. So what is the content of design history file? It is like a story card. What is the, where you collected, how do you come to know the need for such a product, user recommend? Is it like your questionnaire with doctors, or data collected from a conference, or your own analysis from the market trend analysis? That may be a starting point. From that point onwards, how you converted that user need into a design specification, how you start doing the detailed design, developing the software, mechanical, electrical, all those components, and how you verified that, and how you are validated with the end user. All the stories should be maintained as a design history file. And the device master file is the list of documents necessary for manufacturing the product. Once you transfer this device master file to any manufacturing facility or the contract manufacturer, whoever you identify, they should be in position to manufacture a number of product based on the order quantity. So this is, once the product is ready, regulatory submission, we already discussed enough, like product classification, predicate device identification, the submission strategy. So this is the snapshot of the approval heading only. You can see even in FDA website also, it is publicly accessible. You can check for any type of product from the link. Who is the manufacturer of the product, then what is the name of the product, then what is the regulations, what is the class. You see how many product code. It is not like sometimes there may be more than one product code applicable to the product. So that is the reason I mentioned you need to validate with the FDA or with the expert. Then when it was received and approved. So this is the approval process. When it comes to manufacturing, now you remember the first slide I talked about the ecosystem. There may be a contract manufacturer, there may be a supplier of component. If the product is supplied in sterile condition, there may be a sterilization organization. So based on all the ecosystem, you need to identify not only for the manufacturer, not only for you as a medical device company, whether there is a regulations applicable to those type of supplier also, you need to check from these regulations. Based on the need, you need to define the parameters, selection parameter, that is supplier approved supplier list. You need to have an approved supplier list who is doing what for that particular product, and based on that nature of work, whether they are coming under this registration or FDA approval, you need to make sure that. For example, a contract sterilizer, if you are outsourcing the sterilization of your product, they also need to have a FDA approval. Or if there is a manufacturing of a component, for example, a component labeled and you are sending along with your product as it is, then those component manufacturer also need to get registered with the FDA. If sometimes if it is only a component to you and you are going to assemble in your product, it is not a requirement. Like this, there are set of rules defined here. You need to apply all these things while selecting a supplier or ecosystem for manufacturing the product. So this is the snapshot. So the manufacturer also need to get registered, and you need to list the product, whatever you are going to distribute or sell in the US market. So this is the snapshot of how the registration of a manufacturer will look like. Then labeling also is very important thing. So what are the informations you need to place in the label? This is one example. So there are a lot of symbols available. There is a standard called ISO 15223, which lists all the standards. In addition to that, 801 of FDA also is applicable for labeling. So you can see ref means catalog number. Read the accompanying document before you use the device. This is the manufacturing date. This symbol indicates the manufacturer. And do not throw the electronic component as it is. There is a procedure for disposal of the product. Like that, so many labeling recommends from the regulatory point of view, you need to take care of that. Once the product enter into the market, you need to have a system to track. You need to handle the complaints, whatever you are getting through emails or phone calls from the end users, and you need to report the complaint to regulatory authorities based on the nature of the complaint. Sometimes there may be death happen, or sometimes there may be a near to death or serious injury or malfunctioning of the product. So based on the type of events or incident, the manufacturer need to communicate to the FDA. So there is a SLA defined for reporting to FDA. If most of the time the manufacturer fail to report, or they may wrongly categorize that, sometimes it may be reportable, they will conclude it is not a reportable. So there are so many scenarios we come across. For example, one of the manufacturer, they cannot handle the complaint properly. Like 1 million of complaints, we are doing analysis whether that was properly evaluated and closed based on the FDA warning letter. They issued a warning letter to the manufacturer. They don't have time to close all these things, so we are supporting for them to analysis. So like that, this is applicable for post-market surveillance. Then the type of recalls. So once you come to know, conclude the product is defective, then there may be need for correction at the point of use, or sometime you may need to remove the product from the point of use. And these are the class of the recall. Don't get confused between product class and the recall class. This is recall class. Recall class 1 means very serious recall. For example, this is the snapshot. Again, in Fda website, you can see that in the first slide I mentioned it, how FDA is regulating. So this is one way they communicate to the stakeholders. They will communicate through email if you subscribe in the website, or otherwise it is available in the FDA home site also. So for one of the manufacturer, they categorize the recall as a class 1 based on the seriousness of the complaint. You can see almost like 230 thousands of products are recalled from the market. So class 1 means very serious, and class 2 is moderate, temporary, or reversible problem. Class 3 means it need not be health related, it may be more from a process point of view. Then from sustenance point of view, we already discussed, even after entering into the market, the manufacturer need to keep tracking the applicable standards and the regulations, and based on the impact, the design need to be revised, or document need to be updated, or additional testing need to be conducted. And at any point of time, the complaint file need to be maintained for all the type of complaints you receive. Okay. Then FDA will come and audit periodically, at least once in 2 years. This is the data point available in FDA site for year 2021. These are the topics under which FDA will regulate. So there are different level of auditings. They will check the management related activities, then design informations, manufacturing records, materials, how the materials are handled, how the equipments and the facilities are controlled, and the corrective and preventive actions. So these are the 7 key areas they will focus during the inspection. And you can see here the last year data, 2021 data shows like 27% of the non-complaints are observed in the CAPA. There is an issue happened, it was not properly investigated or not properly disposed. And the remaining complaint handling. Now here also you can see the second majority of the issue are in complaint handling, not properly closed or analyzed, not properly reported. The third one is like MDR, medical device reporting. So like that, based on the data nature of non-compliance, this is the matrix. So what is the enforcement? What will happen if there is non-compliance? So 483 is like they will issue a non-compliance or observation report to the manufacturer. Sometimes they will send you a warning letter expecting the manufacturer to give a written statement to correct the violations. So that is warning letter. Sometimes they may ask to remove the non-conforming product from the commercial usage, like even criminal prosecution also. So from 1 year to 2 year, sometimes it can be penalty also, fines up to 100K or maximum 500K based on the nature of violations. So it is, since it is a regulated industry, it may look different, but once you are very clear on that regulations, if you are following that, then there is no need to worry about that. Because of that only, the FDA also is encouraging manufacturer to approach them for any doubt or clarification under the Q submission program. This is my recommendation based on my experience and working with the medtech companies for last 28 years. By this time itself, you can understand the importance of reading all the regulations. You need to brainstorm among your friends. I strongly recommend, don't read on your own. You form a team and collaborate, brainstorm what is your understanding, because a lot of things you will come to know during the brainstorming only. And for product development, establish a milestone based process. Subscribe to FDA website. A lot of information you will get as an email on the alert or guidance document. Expand your network. There are a lot of regulators forums available to raise your query or contribution also. And we already discussed, engage with the FDA in the early stage, and make sure the team, your employees or team are adequately trained and competent. This is one of the key area FDA will check during the inspection. Involve the expert during the design phase. Invite the third party, and means independent reviewers or expert in that product to get their opinion also. And as much as possible, establish system to maintain documents electronically, because going forward, the submission also may be through electronics format. And these are the basic link I am mentioned here. You can go and visit, and you can do a deep dive to understand more insight into the FDA regulations. So that's all from my side.
Thank you, Makesh. That was awesome. Sorry for the mic. That was a really insightful presentation. And even though I got a preview earlier and I asked a ton of questions, I'm sure we could have so many. But I'd like to open it up to folks if they have any questions. So if you're virtual, you can use the raise hand function, or you can throw your question in the chat, or if you're live, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hello? Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your talk. I actually had a question about the whole process, like end-to-end, submitting your applications, actually receiving a mark. Can you give an estimate for how much time that would take? And do you know if it's quicker for other regulatory pathways like software as a medical device?
You mean you want to compare between FDA and CE marking?
No, just the end-to-end process for receiving FDA approval.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I will go to the slide. So for 510K, I mentioned it is like 90 days maximum. The PMA, because based on the product classification, that is the reason you need to be very clear on this understanding. So based on the product classification, the approval process may vary. 510K is 90 days. Within 510K, there is a guideline available to identify whether a special category or abbreviated or a traditional approach is applicable for your product. If you use the decision tree, you can conclude. If it is special, means within 30 days, you can get feedback from FDA. Otherwise, it is 90 days. If it is going to be a PMA, then if it is going to be a class 3 devices, it is 180 days. It will take on an average of 180 days, but sometime I have come across more than 180 days or less than 180 days also.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, Makesh. Thank you so much once again for the presentation.
Thank you.
I have a question about intended use and what happens when it changes. So assuming the class of the device is still the same, all that's changing, and it's been approved and all that's changing is the intended use, is it possible to build upon like a previous submission? Or my understanding is that this is a completely different work stream altogether, right? Like, would it be
Yeah.
a new application? And then with that question, like kind of a sub question, like in terms of budgeting, from your experience, do you think that when an intended use changes, it's a similar amount as the first submission, or if it's a little bit lesser since you already have some data to work with?
Yeah. That is a very good question. So that is the reason I mentioned that sustenance activity, right? So from sustenance point of view, once the product is approved based on the intended use and the classifications, what are you identified initially, whenever you are going for any changes, if you want to add additional features, or if you want to enhance the product with one more intended use or claim, then you need to do an impact analysis. You can see here, this maybe I cannot cover every point. Because of the design change, you need to identify, is there any impact to my product which is already approved or already available in the market? Is there any need to go for any renewal? There is a decision tree. As I mentioned, everything is document. Only thing you need to go and apply. It's a very nicely drafted decision tree. So you need to go navigate the decision tree. Finally, it will conclude no need to go for resubmission. Or sometime it may conclude like you need to go for the resubmission. Based on the decision tree, you need to do that. If there is, you need to document all these things. As part of the design changes, you need to maintain a document in the design history file. I made these changes. and I applied this decision tree guidelines, and I concluded there is no need to go for resubmission. You need to maintain that justification as part of your design history file, and that will be audited. Now you can understand the life cycle, or through the life cycle during the site inspection by FDA, they will check your design history file and approval status. You made a design change. Did you conducted any impact analysis? Yes, this is the evidence. They will go through that impact analysis document, and if they are satisfied, then they will agree, yes, you concluded correctly. Or if they have different opinion, then there may be a chance. Very rarely I have come across, you wrongly concluded. Actually, this design change need to be go for resubmission. So you cannot done a resubmission. You need to go for resubmission, stop the manufacturing, and get approval, then proceed in the further distribution. Like that, they will direct. For that reason only, you need to understand the importance of QSub. So QSub also you can approach. So I'm going to do the changes on the design. I concluded like no need to go for resubmission. Is that correct or not? That way also you can validate. So many things you need to connect the dot interfaces through the life cycle. What I need to do, changes, regulations, approach, all these things you need to connect. I also mentioned get opinion from expert or through your network. It need not be a paid service. That is the reason I always encourage people sharing, especially in the regulatory environment. The networking is very, very important. You can check with your friends, you can check with their notified body, you can check with somebody having more experience. So many ways to validate your understanding. But you need to have you need to take a conscious decision, and everything need to be documented to be part of the decision history. Hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer.
Well,
And Makesh, I know we're a little over time, and I really appreciate you staying with us to answer some questions, but I'm hoping we can get one more in. So Tim, go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks, Makesh. You know, for CLIA certification, if an at-home medical device has to be CLIA certified or not?
home care, right?
Yeah, an at-home medical device, and
Yeah.
if that means it's exempt from CLIA.
No, as I mentioned in that slide, I will go to that. Somebody asked about that SDLC, that's I brought. Okay. So it all driven by the intended use. You need to draft the intended use and go and check the website, FDA database for similar product. While you are designing a product, by the time you will try to identify is there any equivalent device available in the market, right? So you can go and check in the FDA website their name. For example, if ABC is going to be a manufacturer of a similar product, you can check the product detail in the FDA website. Everything is publicly available. So you can download the approval document also. If they got approval, you can download the approval document also and check what is the intended claim they made in that. If you are making more than that claim, then it is your responsibility to go and validate with the FDA. Similar product is available, but they have only 5 claim, but I am going with the 8 claim, 3 additional more claims. Can I still go with the same classification, or do I need to go for de novo? Now you can understand the purpose of de novo. I have novel product. So there is no, I think it is not a equivalent. I want to have a different claim. So what is your recommendation? So Q submission will help you to understand. This is my understanding of predicate device. And I want to, if you allow, I can use the same classification, because obviously your expectation also will be least burden approach, right? So as much as possible, you want to get it approval with in the predicate route only. So which means within 90 days, you can get approval. If there is no predicate device, now you can understand you need to go for IDE, then you need to conduct a clinical trial, then you need to go for PMA. You can understand the time consuming. So you are approaching the FDA to make sure that even though there is additional claim, there is no changes on that basic feature or performance, and I want to make sure this is a predicate. or my product still can be considered as a class 2 under 510K. Like that, you can provide some rationales, and they also review, and they sometimes they also will form an expert to get their opinion to make sure, yes, you can continue the same path. Otherwise, if they are not convinced, then they may ask you to follow the other route. So irrespective of these three scenario, again, the hospital or ambulatory or home environment, and based on the intended use, the classification can be defined. So the database already have 6,000 data. Of course, because of the changes in technology, there may be there may not be a chance to get a predicate device. You may need to go for de novo to get validated with the FDA.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for the great questions. And thank you, Makesh, again for your time and this wonderful talk. I think this was really helpful for a lot of people. And I really appreciate your time. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you once again. Thank you very much for the opportunity given, and wish you all the best. And thank you very much once again.